She really is following what Martin is saying. I mean, that is beautiful, and that's what Dr. Marion about passion for compassion. Do you see, I can use words and have concepts, but the meaning is actually embodied and it's expressed through the body with energy and value. And I hope I'm making sense here, because it's a really crucial point in the
It's interesting, but I suppose you're still saying academic discourses by saying that if we bring affect and percept and intuition into conceptual knowing, we've still got to find validity for it. Yeah? And so we have to have this to provide validity for that.
Exactly that. The issue of validity, for example. If you go for Habermas and say, look, Habermas has got some brilliant writings on communication and the evolution of society. And he says, look, even now as I'm speaking to you, I'm making 4 validity claims. Now, what I'd love you to do is to go to my presentation and respond to it in relation to what Habermas says are the 4 criteria we use for social validity. He says, look, am I being comprehensive? That's his number 1. Now, his second one is one any positivist researcher would recognise. Do you see sufficient evidence in what I'm claiming to justify the assertions I'm making? Okay, now, as a straightforward positivist claim, and as a physical scientist when I started, I recognise and value that. But his third one is really interesting, and it's one that very few physical scientists would ever dream of. And he says, look, anything we produce is influenced by the normative background within which we are living. And it's like a goldfish in the water. We're very often not aware of those cultural influences. And what he claims is that we should show each other that we're very aware of what he calls the normative background from which we're writing. I gave a keynote in South Africa 3 weeks ago. Believe me, their normative background is full of a concern with AIDS. Now, it doesn't actually, in this form, it's not a daily experience for us. It doesn't decimate our teaching force. Yet there, the normative influence that has now come to be as AIDS and HIV issues to do with illness is part of their background. Am I making sense here? You will see this with a woman called Leslie Woods. Her action research is all about AIDS. She makes that normative background explicit. So he's saying, Habermas is saying, look, whatever you're speaking from, make that normative background as explicit as you can so that we can actually show each other we're very aware that we're speaking from within a particular cultural and historical context. And his fourth one, which I like very much indeed, and it's something you can test out with my website, he says that we've got this 4th criteria, which is to do with authenticity. And he says that we can only show over time and interaction that we're truly committed to the values that we say we espouse. So you've no reason to believe what I've been saying today in terms of my authenticity. You might have an intuition, but I would suggest that if you go back to my 33 years from the first presentation I gave and then just follow the development with the accounts on the website, then it will be unmistakable. And certainly a 93 publication of mine on academic freedom, where I talk about some of the experiences at that university. But I think you'll find it quite difficult to deny, if you like, that Jack is authentic in what he's saying about his passion for academic freedom. Are you okay with this, just in terms of that question about validity, because it's the most important one? And I think Habermas helps us a lot. Yeah?
Going back to one of the things you said about validity, Jack, the issue of evidence for assertions. With something like this wonderful clip, I think there's another step maybe that we need to consider, and that's the one of interpretation. I mean, when I saw this lady doing her wonderful gestures, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I think it could mean, I love my husband because he's cared for me. It could mean, isn't my husband cute? It could mean, isn't he going on a bit? You know, so how do I know that what somebody says that means is actually what she meant it to mean, especially if it's an Alzheimer's patient? Or, you know, I mean...
No, your question is so important about the validity of the interpretation. This is why the notion of a visual narrative with context is crucial. Now here, the reason why Marion Naidu, the researcher, talked about the passion for compassion was, there you have George, and he's reading from a script about all the things he does. So this is the context. You can hear him going on, and it's a full minute, but wherever I press it.
So to manage at home, cooking, housekeeping, shopping, etc. If there's a woman that is a carer, then it's the other way. She has to cope with emergencies in the home, such as changing fuses, washes, and a multitude of other jobs that used to be done by a spouse or partner. The carers and the private residence.
Now, I think that as you hear the visual, plus the language, it reduces down the range of interpretations. So that we could still offer a range of interpretation. But what Marion does is say, first of all, that sense of compassion. There appears to Marion, at that moment, to be a loving recognition on the part of Marion. So if you look at the change of expression in Marion, now, Marion Naidu was saying, look, there was something beautiful for Marion at that moment where the gaze of Marion, from the Alzheimer's patient that you thought was comatose, to the point where she's actually clearly taking in what George is actually saying about the care. And then you get this. Now, we can say whatever we like about our interpretations of that, but what Marion has done in her doctorate is to say, and I think, if you like, this is almost beyond reasonable doubt, is that Jack, and she did this with the examiners, of moving this cursor backwards and forwards, she was saying, now there is where my own passion for compassion was evoked. Okay, so I agree, I think that point about interpretation is really vital, and also the one about validity. And each of these accounts has got to take that very carefully into consideration. But I think it helps it to narrow down this notion of the visual and the particular visual narrative, giving a lot of context and a lot of insights into the relationship. But I think, again, we continue to live with that as something which has always got to be open to question.
That to me is what's important, is that to resist that desire to always close down interpretation as a prerequisite for validity. I think that is actually that is what a lot of your work is resisting, and I think that's a good or a healthy notion. So yes, you can't deny the need to question, but to say it always has to be closed down to the nth degree so that there could be no other interpretation actually is counter. It's not helpful.
Nonetheless, the idea that we are generating new living standards of judgment, grounded in that energy flow, with values that we can actually make public. So you can actually be critical of it in an open public forum, which helps us, I think, to, again, strengthen and enhance the validity and also the rigour of what we're doing. But I think it is opening up new forms of representation, which philosophers can help by seeing how the methodological values can be communicated as epistemological standards of judgment. And I do think we try. Yeah. Is there anything else? Yes.
Because I came to the session as a whole to taking a lead from the title of what are the issues that philosophy can usefully bring to bear on higher education issues as well. And when you started off, I thought of one, which unless you listed, they're all PhD graduates, the ones you listed, because one of my thoughts was particularly if this is practitioner researching, why aren't they professional doctorates?
That was my decision when I went to the University of Bath. I held that, right, what could I do to change the status of the practical knowledge, the embodied knowledge of educators? Now, 20 years ago, the doctorates, the PhD, was definitely of higher status than the MD. So what I did was I focused on getting the doctorates, which are in fact, I would say, professional doctorates in the sense of bringing the knowledge of the educator into the academy. But they are all PhDs. And in fact, apart from a couple that are MDs, but,
and so the epistemological question is what sort of knowledge is involved, and there's certainly a strong current of thought in sociology of higher education that it's a different sort of knowledge for professional doctors, such as the MD.
Well, it is clear.
And one shouldn't be seen as inferior to the other, because they're just different sorts of knowledge, and can't exploit that.
Yeah, and I think we've got to be a little careful here, because the sociologists, I think we could show, have dominated for many years what counts as educational knowledge. In fact, Jack Whitehead's presidential address was arguing that we should change the name of BERA so it became the British Education Research Association and not the British Educational Research Association. presentation. Now, I've always resisted that, okay? Because I've always wanted to retain something rather particular about educational, right? Yeah? Now, I do agree with you that if you do, for example, social science research, the theories that are generated are either propositional or dialectical. Now, usually they are propositional in the sense of eliminating contradictions from correct thought. Now, if you bring your embodied knowledge as educators into the academy as valid knowledge, in my judgment, you are full, and I am, of living contradictions. I don't believe we can go anywhere at the moment because of the pressures on us where we can live our values as fully as we wish to do. I mean, even now we're going to be subjected to enormous political and economic constraints over the next few years. This is going to raise enormous tension. Now, the sociologists can analyse that, and I use Amartya Sen's work. Brilliant. I love his economic theory of human capability. I use a lot of Habermas. I love Foucault's work. But I use them as insights into the generation of what I'm calling my own living theory. Now, my living theory is my explanation for my influence in my own learning and the learning of others, as well as in the social formation in which I live and work. Now, that living theory has got a very different logic and language to the traditional form in the, I would in the philosophy, the psychology, sociology, and history. So I think you're absolutely right. There are very different forms of theory involved here. And we've got to be very careful to understand that if you allow the social scientists, as I think we have in BERA, to control the agenda of what counts as educational knowledge, we're in great danger of actually doing what the philosophers did in the late 60s, early 70s, of saying, the actual embodied knowledge of the educator is not being brought into the academy for legitimation and given high status. So, I think your question, though, is one we can keep coming back to. It's so vital. I know at Liverpool Hope, Joan Walton from Liverpool Hope, the new MD programme is starting, and they're involving me in that. And I'm really keen to get professional doctorates, really high level status and the knowledge that's being generated. So it's really vital, that question, the different forms of theory.
Jack, would it be helpful just to draw attention to the example of an Ed.D. thesis and a professional master's dissertation that's on your living theory?
Which one do you think people
thinking
want
of
to see?
Barry Hymas, and I'm thinking of Chris Jones.
I'm going to see if I can just get this. I'm not sure I can. No, I don't think I can just bring it up like that. It's a shame. Let me just try again. If I go into the masters, all of these are, from professional masters writings, tackling questions of the kind, how do I improve the quality of my pupils' work? Now, if you go into the masters section, you'll see, I think, they're all related to this notion of professional masters, professional doctorate. But there's a beautiful one here under the Understand Learners and Learners. I do hope people will, children, carry out action research about learning, creating their own learning theory, by Joy Mountain. Now, again, that one involves the children, because the 6-year-olds reflected on Bell Wallace's action reflection cycle, and they criticised it on the grounds that it was 2-dimensional. And these 6-year-olds explained how it had to be 3-dimensional and also dynamic, it was moving. And they had Bell Wallace down to the school. And this was the president of the Association of Enable and Gifted Children. And Bell had agreed with these 6-year-olds about their revision of her model of action research. And this question about can children carry out action research into their own learning, I do think that is a brilliant one. It's taking too long to come up in terms of the PDF file, but well, it is coming. But you can access that from the master's section, which is all professional learning, bringing embodied knowledge of the master educators into the academy. And that living theory section, I think you'll find quite a number to take on insights from traditional theory as each individuals generate their own living theory. Oh, okay, I think I'm done. Are we all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no, thanks indeed.